This is Rising from the Shadows. What would your life look like if you stopped second-guessing yourself, stopped playing small, and finally broke free from the cycles that have kept you stuck? Well, that's what the Ignite Momentum Practicum is all about. It's a 6-week transformational coaching experience designed to help you break through people-pleasing, self-doubt, and codependency once and for all. And here's the best part. You get to choose your path. You can matriculate through the one-on-one accelerator. It's private, high-touch coaching, you and me one-on-one. Weekly breakthrough calls, a custom action plan, deep mindset work, and real-time support to help you reclaim your power and rebuild your confidence. Option 2 is the group intensive. This is where transformation meets community. Weekly live sessions with a cohort of like-minded individuals, hot seat coaching, Q&A, bonus trainings, and a space where you're truly seen and supported without judgment. So whether you want personalized guidance or collective energy, the Ignite Momentum Practicum gives you the tools, structure, and support to stop circling the same patterns and start building unstoppable momentum. Ready to take the next step? Schedule your momentum call now at ignitingmomentum.co. That's ignitingmomentum.co. You'll find all the details there. Welcome back to Rising from the Shadows, the podcast where we explore the journey of healing from trauma, reclaiming power, and thriving beyond the shadows of our past. I'm your host, Marlon Wesh, and today I'm thrilled to bring you another powerful conversation. Our guest today is Celeste Case-Ruchala. Celeste is a speaker, writer, and self-discovery coach helping women reconnect with who they are and step fully into their radiance. Drawing from her own journey through endurance sports, leadership, and personal transformation, she empowers others to rewrite their inner narratives and redefine success on their own terms. She is the author of In Search of Us and an upcoming book, Becoming the Radiant Woman, and host of women's circles that foster deep, authentic connection. Celeste, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Marlon. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. I always like to start off with a pretty open-ended question, so we can just let it naturally go into your story. So what I want to ask is for you to tell us a little bit of who you are today. What was the journey that brought you here, and where do you hope to be in the future?
Oh, that's a great question. Who I am today. Well, I like to not give you all of my titles and roles right off the bat, but I'm going to give them to you just because that's what's easiest to digest. So I am a clarinetist. I help run a consulting company. I'm a life coach. I run triathlons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm a little insane. And, I'm on this journey of helping create women connections. Um, when I lived in Phoenix, so now I live in Olympia, Washington, but when I lived in Phoenix for 10 years, I realized I didn't know myself. And that was a really big kind of journey for me. So I was engaged. This is 2 years ago. Um, And what happened was 2 weeks before the wedding, I went to a conference. And one of my coworkers that I had known for maybe a year, we were going on a walk and we were having just a random conversation, nothing big. And then all of a sudden he goes, "Can I ask you something?" And I was like, "Sure," not expecting it to be anything big. And he goes, "Do you ever feel seen?" And I was like, "What?" And I started to cry because in that moment I realized, wow, I can't start a life with somebody if I don't know who I am. And so I started questioning everything and it kind of started unraveling my entire life in this process. And when I got home, I talked to my fiance and I was like, "Hey, I I don't know if this is going to happen. Um, and so as we went along that journey, I ultimately decided that I needed to walk away from the altar. But the people pleasing side of me forced me to go through with the ceremony.
Mm.
I couldn't show up and say, "Hey, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, I'm sorry, we're not going to have this wedding. We paid a lot of money for it and, I have cold feet." So what wound up happening was after the wedding, after drinking too much, after not smiling through the photos and,
Mm.
putting on my best face, I had a panic attack in the shower for like an hour. The water was cold. I was laying on the floor, just tears, sobbing, like, what is wrong with my life right now? Why can't I just be happy with this? Everyone's saying, you should just be happy. This guy is so nice. And so it set me on this journey of figuring out who I am and what I really enjoy and what I really like. So that's been kind of the process over the last 2 years of figuring out who is Celeste.
Thanks for sharing that. I always say that there's like a moment where um, who you are, who you're meant to be, that voice gets so loud that you just can't ignore it anymore. And it's not even like, you want to do the thing. You absolutely do not want to do the thing, but it compels you to. Most of the people I talk to have that exact same story. You know, like this wasn't something I chose. Well, of course we choose, but like this was something that I couldn't move forward without of that. So, I mean, that's very congruent with stories I hear. What do you attribute your people pleasing to?
Oh my goodness. When I was younger, both my parents are professors. My entire family has
No
doctorates.
pressure.
So if that gives you any expectation of what my life was supposed to look like, right? I was always told, get straight A's or you're never going to make it to college. But college was an expectation. Be like us. The goal is to have, letters after your name or before your name. And so I took it kind of to the extreme. Like when I was little, I did 3 different sports. I did 2 different instruments, and it just kept perpetuating it. You never felt like you were truly seen unless you were succeeding in something or you were
Mm.
achieving. So if you look at my wall, there's probably 1,000 medals on it, right? And
Hmm.
3 degrees on the wall. That's where people pleasing comes from because somebody told you you weren't enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so as you were saying that, I was just reflecting on when I got out of the Marine Corps and I was going to college. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I settled on financial advising because it sounded like an important job, right? Something that people could respect. Like I wasn't just this vet that was floundering after service, like the stereotypical story really is. And I always knew that I was a creative person, that I was an intuitive person, I was an empathic person, but that doesn't make money, right? And then there just came a point where it's like I just can't do this anymore. Um, what was the moment? I know you talked about having the panic attack in the shower, but was there a moment where prior to that or in between that in the conversation you had with your friend at a conference that you started telling yourself the truth about what was going on with you?
Never. Not before that moment where, I broke down on the streets of Las Vegas too,
Oh
right? So like
man.
I'm full on crying in Vegas, yeah. Um, no, I think that was the moment where it just kind of shocked my system. And, you never think that your life needs to change. You think you're doing all of the things that are going to lead up to that successful, happy life on paper, right? Um, so no, that was my defining moment. And for him to be so shocked, like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Like you're supposed to have your shit together. And then for him to find out that I didn't, or I didn't think I did, that was interesting.
Yeah. In the journey of reclaiming power, I know it's not just about taking control, but rediscovering the parts of ourselves that we thought were lost. What actions did you take to rebuild your sense of self and create a space where you felt safe, grounded, and seen?
That's a great question. The first thing was to find friendships that were actually meaningful. When I lived in Phoenix, and I hate to say this because it's Scottsdale, but everything seemed so plastic.
Mm.
All of the conversations were transactional. Every time I would leave, like dinner with friends, they would never follow up with me to see how my week was going, which just felt awful, right? Um, and so my goal when I moved here was to just create as many deep connections as I could. So that's kind of what led me down the women's circle path. But the other things that I got to do, because when you're a people pleaser, you kind of take on the identity of other people, which you
Hmm.
never realize,
Yeah.
right? And so
Which,
when
by
I
the
was
way, makes you
dating,
really good at sales.
yes, it does. Hey, have you ever heard of this thing?
Yeah.
Do you want to try it?
Mm.
Because I've been doing it. No. So people keep asking me, is that how you started doing triathlon? And I think to some effect, it kind of was that. I was a swimmer for a really long time, but when you get caught up in these groups of people that are doing the same thing, they're like, hey, when's your next race? Okay. And then it just perpetuates it. And then you never stop to ask, hey, do I actually really like this thing? Or when you're in a partnership with somebody, you never stop to say, okay, well, I like spending time with this person, but is this activity that we're doing together theirs? Or because I'm choosing to do it? And so when I moved here, I got to kind of make a list of all of the things that I ever wanted to try. So I went on Meetup, I went on Eventbrite, I went on, the internet and tried to find all of the things. So um, I've tried improv, I've done salsa dancing, bachata. Um, I have a conflict crash course this weekend just because it sounded interesting to
Mm.
learn about. Um, and so, the more that you can kind of get curious about what your life could be or who you want to be, you can try on all of these different hats. And they're not masks anymore. They're really just getting curious about, okay, well, what does Celeste feel like in this space? What does she like to do when she, is dancing? Which actions does she like? So you kind of start defining what your life can look like or who you want to be, and you start filling it with these joyful activities and be excited to wake up in the morning.
Mm.
One more thing that I really like is when I was at my lowest point, this was way before the wedding, 5 years ago, when I would look into the mirror, probably after a few glasses of wine at night, feeling like nobody would ever love me. Because I kept telling myself that. I'd look in the mirror and I'd be like, tomorrow you're going to be a better person and people are going to like you. But I never
Mm.
like looked into my own eyes. Yeah, and so, you see this stranger looking back at you, and I heard this Instagram video at the beginning of last year, which I resonated with me so much. It said, um, what you really need to do is when you wake up in the morning, when you're most groggy, when you're most like swollen and puffy, and you look in the you look in the mirror and you look into your eyes and you say, I love you. What do you need today?
Mm.
And you just stand there and you listen. And it feels really silly to do it for the first probably 20 times because you don't believe it. But then when you start actually hearing yourself and you like catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror later on during the day and you're like, yeah, you just did this thing. You're awesome. And you start kind of going through the cycle. It just feels so good to be able to trust yourself and to show up for yourself and to love yourself.
That's amazing. So we're twins. Um, I had this same experience. I have an iPhone note with all the things that I wanted to try. First, it was all the things that I knew I liked or thought I liked or had liked before, and then other things that I wanted to try. And I had that same experience in the mirror. This was after I uh, made the decision to leave my marriage. I was in the downstairs powder room of the house, and I had used the bathroom, and I was washing my hands, and I just randomly looked up at the mirror. It wasn't, anything that I hadn't done before, and like for the first time in 7 years, I recognized my face, and I saw like the twinkle that was like back in my like I am a fool. Like everybody who knows me knows like I'm as silly as I am serious. And I've always just had this joy about me. In fact, I was at my friend's house this past weekend. My childhood best friend and his wife has videos of us like back in 2005. I was like, oh my God, I was as crazy and as silly then as I am now. Like nothing, that was Marlon. That was real Marlon. So when I saw my eyes in the twinkle, I'm like standing there and I'm starting to cry and I'm saying hi to myself, like, haven't seen you a while, like hi, you know. Such a profound moment. One of the things that I've always struggled with, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about this. You appear to be a curious person. I'm a curious person. How can you tell that these things that you're doing aren't things that you're just curious about versus taking on the identities of the people around you?
That is a great question. I usually force myself to go do things by myself. I call them self dates.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know anything about the artist way,
I keep
Julia
hearing it
Cameron.
on TikTok.
So I started that after I started doing the self dates, but it really encourages you to go out and take your inner artist on a date,
Mm,
whether it's to like buy new art supplies or to go see, I don't know, do something that you've never done before and just get curious about the world around you. That way, it's all about you and it's not about anybody else. No one else is allowed to come with you.
mhm.
So take yourself out to the restaurant that you really want to go try. Or, you know, I I really want to go to the trampoline park. I know I'm not 5, but that sounds like a lot of fun to me. So I think that might be my next date with myself is just to go be silly and find these activities that light you up that you're not going with anybody else for. That way you know in your gut, it says, "Hey, I really like this," or "Man, nope,
Mhm.
I've been here for 5 minutes and I'm
I
gonna go
was just
home."
gonna ask you, do you ever just be like, okay, I'm done? Like, um, I love eating, and so like the restaurant solo date thing has always been a thing. Like I love doing that, um, but I often be like, okay, I'm ready to go home as almost as soon. And it's not because I'm nervous or anything like that. I just like don't want to do it anymore. I don't know if you've ever had experiences like that.
Well, it's mostly when I'm with people. When you go
Mm,
out on a date and you're like, I could be at the gym right now. I could be curled up on the couch with my dog watching my favorite TV show. Those are usually the moments. And then those are the moments that you don't speak up and you don't listen to yourself and you're kind of self-abandoning.
mhm,
So if you can kind of pay attention to those moments when you're out in public and just it really takes just being present in the moment and taking a few breaths and listening to yourself and then not being able to or not being afraid to speak up and setting a boundary and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm really glad that I made it here, but I'm gonna go home." And that's all you have to say.
that's awesome. First of all, my apologies on behalf of my sex. Second, what you said about being present. I was going through your TikTok account, and you had a video that you talked about performance versus presence. Can you dive into that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. So we all know what it takes to make someone like us, right? So we put on a face or, we try on 30 different outfits in the mirror just to make sure that, we're cute enough or we look smart enough, right? Not just who we are and what we like to wear. So when we go out into public, we're wearing these different masks for different people. And you might have a bag full of them, depending on the situation, whether I have to be the smart one and put on the glasses, or, I have to be the super likable one or the really sweet and innocent one. And so you're putting on these performances for people. You're almost auditioning for roles
Mm,
for everybody else's life. And you're really, like I said before, abandoning yourself because you're not giving yourself that love and attention. And when you walk away from those situations, you feel so alone and
mm.
unseen because the person that they were seeing was that role that you were playing and not your true self. And that's the really hard thing about being in this age of connectedness, right? We
Yeah,
all have cell phones, we've got social media, we've got internet, and you can talk to somebody, some random stranger, immediately, anywhere in the world. But we feel disconnected because we're putting on this performance of somebody that we're not, just so that somebody will like that version of us. But what happens when we show up as our full self? and allow ourselves to decide whether we want to have that interaction or not, or whether we like that person or not. It's like going on a date, right? You shouldn't be nervous because you're not showing up to let them choose you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're showing up to say, do I actually like you?
Yeah.
And do I want to have you come alongside me?
Yeah. That's so true. First of all, stop talking about me. So, um, that really struck a chord about auditioning for different people's lives. This is certainly something that I've always struggled with. I was homeschooled my entire life until I joined the Marines. Um, and I'm proud to say I navigated from being isolated to getting into the real world fairly good considering the circumstances. And part of that was, I guess, to some degree, code switching. Although I didn't know who I was yet, so I certainly probably was trying on different personalities. Some of them I really liked, and so I guess the question I have is, again, like the curiosity thing. What is uh, like? I like dressing up. I live in New England. I love colonial architecture. I love, my friend lives in Laguna Beach, and I always complain to him. I was like, everything's so new here. Like everything's so new. Like, and I definitely like the, Ralph Lauren, hunting lodge look or what have you. It just feels classic, old, and what's the word I'm looking for? Timeless. And
Mm.
so I remember when I was living in Philly, that was the first time I started golfing with a friend that was pretty well off, and so I was kind of like exposed to his life as a young person, and I was like, "This is nice. I like this. I want to get this." So when I moved to Boston for college, there were opportunities to join like social clubs, like a private dining club here and stuff like that. Pretty bougie. I love it, right? And of course, the people in there are very, hello. um, I find it entertaining sometimes to like interact in that way, knowing it is completely ridiculous. What's wrong with me?
There's nothing wrong with you. It's being curious about other people and like really trying to figure out, are they being authentic or are they just kind of wearing their own mask?
Yeah, yeah. I will say though, after stepping out of my people pleasing ways, I have become spicier. I tend to argue a lot more than I ever have before. Um, whether
Because you have your own opinion now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And not only that, my answers are much shorter. I don't explain myself. It's no, I won't be doing that. Thanks for thinking of me, but no. Um,
I
you know,
love that.
just I have to say though, I had to practice that. I had lists of phrases. And now it comes naturally. Now I'm truly annoyed when somebody says something, sexist or racist or homophobic. It's like truly annoying, and I don't have to be brave, stand up, and it's a beautiful thing. Was there a moment in time for you that you're like, huh, I'm healing?
Every day.
Yeah.
It no, it's in these little bits and pieces where, you catch yourself and you're like, "Oh, what did I just do?" Like there was this part of me that was a knee-jerk reaction of my past self that I caught that thought happening before it actually happened, and I'm like, "Oh,
Mm,
whoa. Let's take a second here and let's choose something else."
yeah.
Um, yeah, I used to, this is a terrible thing. So I guess you probably don't know because you're not a woman, but from the time that we grow up, we're kind of taught that somebody will come and save you and then your
Yeah.
life can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Disney movies, Prince Charming, whatever. So you think that someone's going to come knock on your door and say, "Hey, Celeste, I've been waiting for you. Let's drive on off into the sunset." And um you're gonna have to remind me of your question because I went off on a tangent really
About
fast, and then I'll.
there was there a moment in time when you realized, wow, like I'm healing, like this is not the old Celeste.
So I used to, everywhere I went, would scan. men's hands for wedding rings.
So crazy.
Th- Right? Is that not crazy? And you're like, okay, are you viable? Can I
Right,
date you?
right.
I don't even know a thing about you. And so even now,
Am I
still when I'm
possibly
driving around,
attractive to you? Yeah, yeah.
yes, is there something I can offer you? You have no idea who I am. And so when I'm still driving around and I see some guy running down the street, I catch myself and I look and I'm like, Celeste, you are driving. He is running. There's no possible scenario that you're ever going to meet. And, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But that second that you catch yourself and you're like, why am I looking? Like, why do I want to add some random person to my life? My life is not full enough as it is. So that's the moment where when I catch myself and I'm like, I don't need that anymore. That's when I know I'm healing.
That's very very relatable. Although I am not a woman, I think this is very interesting. Um, how our very paternalistic society make sure both men and women play the roles. Because for me, when I was a child, under abusive situations, of course, I wanted someone to save me. But then as I got older and, I'm romantically involved, I felt my only value to somebody would be to be able to save them. So it's definitely a dynamic where I think it played into, and I'm, on the internet, unfortunately, and I see all these conversations about um, men's thoughts regarding dating and what their role is in the world, and women's thoughts of what the role of men and yada yada. And it's very sad that so often people are talking about the different sides of the same coin. Like I've observed that men are, very much like, what the hell? The patriarchy promised me these things, and you're opting out of that. And I think women are also saying, like, what the hell? Like, I know that I want a life free of control, but the patriarchy promised me a provider. You're opting out of that, and it's just like this. It's like a pull, a push and pull between like wanting to be free of something, but just bound to a system that just doesn't work um, for anyone. And it's definitely one of the harder things that I've observed to kind of like throw off the roles that we're supposed to play, even when we feel that we're healed or we're healing. Some of those innate programming it just stays there. Have you observed any of that in your practice or personally?
So there's these scripts that we're told, right? Or expectations that we've been handed since we were younger. People, you go on this conveyor belt of life, and there's this rule book that you're taught, right? Go to school, get good grades, find a man, get married, have kids, then retire. Then you can have this life that you want. And so everyone's really confused by the fact that they don't feel happy while they're doing this,
Hmm.
right? And they're always taught that it's this have, do, be model. If I have this, the money, the relationship, the whatever, then I can do this, then I can go on vacation or I can whatever. And then I'll be happy or then I'll be in love or whatever it
Hmm.
is. But what we really try to focus on in the healing space, in the coaching space, is this be, do, have. And so, can I be the person that I want to be today? Start living a life that's in alignment with my core values, with my purpose, because then you'll already kind of be fulfilled.
Hmm.
And then you can start doing all of the things that you want to be doing, whether that's creating women's circles or having, deep conversations with women or, starting your own life coaching practice. Then you can have all of the fulfillment and the financial desires, all of the things will just start falling into place because you're being the person that you're authentically.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking about that comment now back to when you said you were driving and you saw that man like running. What just came to me was the idea of scarcity. That so much of our wanting to have this, have that is because we think there's not enough. And if we need to secure it now, so we get something. Um, can you talk a little bit about how scarcity kind of is connected with people pleasing?
Yeah. That is such a terrifying concept too, right?
Mhm.
Where you're like, that I'm not going to be enough for this person, or, you know, I'm never going to have the life that I want. Because when you think about it, okay, so I found Brianna Weiss's book, The Mountain Is You, last summer. Absolutely love it. If you haven't read it, totally read it. But the concept in there is that if you have just a few, like one thing that you're focusing on in your life, and you're, driving to that one point, you're kind of creating that scarcity mindset, right? Because I
Mhm.
want this one job. If you don't get it, then you have to start all over again, right? And create new goals and dreams. But if you allow your mind to open and you don't have one set goal in mind, there are possibilities that can happen that you could never even dream of. Your brain is the limitation.
If this podcast speaks to you, if you're on the path of healing, reclaiming your voice, or just trying to piece together who you really are after surviving the unthinkable, I want to invite you into a space where you don't have to do it alone. Join our Facebook group created for survivors, cycle breakers, and people rebuilding themselves from the inside out. In there, we go deeper. Weekly prompts, live streams, raw conversations, and a whole lot of people who just get it. No pretending, no pressure, just truth, growth, and community. Search Rising from the Shadows, The Path to Reclaiming You on Facebook, or hit the link in the show notes to join the community.
Because you can't even conceptualize all of the amazing things that the world has in store for you.
Mhm.
And when you allow yourself to start opening up to abundance instead of thinking about just holding on so tightly to that one thing, you start opening, the doors to say, hey, come on in. I've got this open energy. I'm curious about what a relationship might look like, or I'm curious about what this job might look like, but I
Mhm.
don't have 100% idea on what it looks like. Then you start allowing these other things to unfold, and
Yeah.
these questions and wonder. Yeah.
Yeah. We could totally go forever about this because I talk a lot about shame also, and the idea of like I can't try this thing because of the shame that comes with possibly failing at it, instead of realizing I have so many options. This might not work, that might not work, that might not work, but I'm a curious being and I want to keep exploring. There's no shame about that. Um, so that idea of shame and scarcity definitely go hand in hand. Um, we talked a lot about kind of the tools and the the theory around healing from a life of codependency. Prior to this interview, we you had mentioned that you were in an abusive relationship with a narcissist for 15 years, or 15 years ago. Um,
Yeah.
what state of mind were you in when you entered that relationship, and what gave you the power to leave?
It terrifies me to think about the reason I got into this relationship. And it's also what makes me really want to form these really great women's connections. Because when we're younger as women, women aren't necessarily a safe space. We don't feel that it's okay to be vulnerable with them. And so we're always in this competition mode.
Mm.
What can I get out of this situation? Or can I can I have your boyfriend, right? And it was that situation. My friend had been dating this guy, um, and I didn't notice the red flags that she was talking about when she was in this relationship with this guy. And for some reason, he started to pull me in, and I fell for it. And so I was like, haha, I got your boyfriend. That's a terrible thing, right? But I was excited about it. I was like, I win. This guy is amazing and beautiful and very talented percussionist. Sure, I'm all in. So he started to love bomb me, and I didn't know what that concept was. I was
Yeah.
20 years old. You have no idea. And no one ever talks to you about that, right? Like you start believing what love is when you first have love when I was 16 or however old. And it's sweet and kind and adoring. And so when you see that again mirrored to you, you're like, oh yes, I found it again.
Mhm.
And then the other things start to happen very slowly, and you start getting pulled away from your friendships. My mother even said something to me, but you don't believe it in those moments.
Mhm.
I was conditioned to answer my text messages within 30 seconds because if I didn't respond within 30
Mm.
seconds, I knew I would get yelled at. I would be called terrible, terrible names. I would probably be on the floor crying in tears in the kitchen for like half an hour over a text message, right?
Mhm.
Because he, as a narcissist, was afraid that I was doing the same things to him that he was doing to me, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't realize how deep into a hole you are until somebody else really sees it and calls you out on it. And you still don't even want to listen to them. And the interesting thing is, we had moved into an apartment together. Um, And I still like, if you didn't answer your text messages, I get locked out sometimes
Mm.
and like have to figure out where I was going to live. So my friend, she didn't know me very well. It was the beginning of my second semester. She was brand new. And after rehearsal one night, we walked out and I guess she must have seen the look on my face after I got a text message and she snatched my phone out of my hand and I chased her around the parking lot for a half an hour. And I was like, hey, I need that back. I really need that back. It's not gonna be good for me if I get home and, I haven't answered. And she's like, Celeste, why do you have to answer back? And I was like, because I'm gonna get yelled at. She goes, Celeste, say that again.
Mm.
I was like, I'm gonna get yelled at. I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
what, how is that okay? And so after that point, I'm like, I gotta check myself. But And so that's kind of what started down that road. But the really scary thing is that conditioned me for years.
Yeah.
I still, anytime I get a text message, immediately grab my phone.
Mm.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And so you kind of learn to have this anxiety. Your nervous system reacts in these ways still 20 years later,
Yeah.
which is terrifying.
One of the things I always, I tell people that like I raw dogged my life, for 36 years, and then I finally needed medication because I was having the same thing. If I saw, a black Hyundai Tucson, if I got a text or an email with the name, even if it was a different person, just happened to have the name, like I would straight up have a panic attack. My heart would leap out of my chest, and it took. Um, Pharmaceutical intervention to just bring me back to you know that neutral point. The conditioning thing is so real. There's that episode of The Office, right, where Jim gives like a M&M or a Tic Tac to Dwight every time he did something, to the point where if he did it, he would just like put his hand out without even knowing. And we laugh about it, but it's so it's so um like sinister, the conditioning. It's not like right out and saying like, okay, now these are the rules. um because you want to please, right? Of course you're committed to making this relationship work. So that means if somebody complains about something, like, maybe you should look at yourself and adjust and adjust and adjust, and then you adjust so much that um you lose yourself.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that when you got with him, that you felt like, oh, I win. He's gorgeous, he's talented. Did you feel before that you weren't winning?
Yeah. When dating is so hard.
Tell me
And
about it.
even finding a place in yourself, right? Where I never once took the moments to look at myself in the mirror, right? Like we talked about before, and give yourself that own validation. And so you thrive off of your self-worth based on other people. Are they giving me attention? Are they did I win something? Are they going to think that I'm successful? Just like when you said a finance, right? You want that title because people are going to look at you and say, "Hey, you're so successful. I want to know you." So yeah, even with all the successes that I had, I still didn't feel like I was enough.
Yeah, I'm reminded by another video that I watched of yours where you said something to the effect that if you need their validation, then they have all the control. Um, so poignant, like absolutely. It's people talk about become the villain in their lives, and it's almost kind of like breakup meme culture, but it truly is just letting go of having to make sure people think you're good because you are good. You have good intentions. You work hard to do right by people, and that goalpost keeps moving further and further with people who that just take. Um, so dropping that need for validation is so important. I love that you talked about that. Um, Another thing that you said that I really liked, you talked about how communities heal. Um, was there a specific community that you started healing within, and how was it impactful for you?
So when I moved to Olympia, I didn't know anybody. I literally moved here, bought a house, and then had to figure everything else out. Um, and the interesting thing is everybody when I moved there, like, oh, your problems are still gonna follow you. And I was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Yeah, they still follow you. It's still hard to make friendships after
Hmm.
you're 30. It's still hard to, connect with people because everyone's looking down at their phone and scrolling.
Yeah.
And so when I finally took the time to start getting curious about someone else,
If you're listening to this and you've got a story to tell, whether it's your personal story of healing and reclaiming your voice or rising from rock bottom, or you're a professional with powerful insight into trauma, identity, resilience, or transformation, then I want to hear from you. Rising from the Shadows is more than just a podcast. It's a space where truth is honored, power is reclaimed, and stories heal. If you have something to share that could empower others to stop shrinking and start rising, I'd love for you to apply to be a guest on the show. Just head to tellmystory.risingfromtheshadows.com to submit your application. Let's rise together, one voice, one breakthrough, one story at a time.
and like meeting them where they were, that's when the magic started to happen. So I created a women's group in Tacoma, and I wasn't sure if anybody was going to show up. So I started this in January, and it's incredible because I'll come with topics and then there's 10 questions. It's all in the In Search of Us book. It kind of teaches you how to create women's groups, but then also gives you these conversations topics
Mm,
that you can use with anybody. But what's fun about it is, we'll do unpacking self-worth, and we'll really talk about that suitcase that you've been carrying around for your entire life of
mm.
things that make you worthy or things that don't make you worthy, and like trying to take things out of it so that you know who you are and you're okay with yourself. We've also done redefining success and what it means to you to be successful and fulfilled. And so, as I start having these conversations with other women and they start taking down their walls, you hear people saying the exact same things that have happened in your life. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought I was living this life by myself.
Mhm.
And you're telling me that you are living the same thing. And it makes it so much more authentic because you can connect with somebody and you don't feel so alone.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said that. I credit my coming into awareness because I went down a TikTok rabbit hole. First, it was about, attachment theory, this is avoidant, this is anxiously attached, yada, yada. And so I had come to the conclusion, okay, I'm anxiously attached and they're an avoidant. And turns out I'm not anxiously attached when somebody is giving as much, as I'm giving. Um, but it wasn't until I wish I could remember the specific woman that was detailing her story, like leaving the narcissist. Like, of course, I've heard the word narcissist before, but I didn't, it was nothing that I ever engaged with. And it was her stories that was like identical to mine. And
Mhm.
I had this realization, it's like, oh, wow, if the if the roles were reversed and I was the man doing this to her, there is an unquestionable reality that I would immediately be like, put down. Like, this is not right. You need to leave him. You deserve better, yada, yada. Because I didn't have quite empathy for myself, but I could feel it for other people. So like, if this is what she's experiencing, of course she deserves to escape. And so that's what, I didn't have an official community. In fact, I lost all of my community. But hearing people tell the stories is, kind of a parasocial community, and it was so impactful for me. And that's why I do this too, right? Like, I have two goals. First is to help people get back to who they are, and that starts with telling their story, and then kind of finding a path forward that takes you, lets you get rid of the pain of the story, but not the victory of moving past it. This has been a really great conversation. If there's one lesson you'd want the listeners to take away from your journey, what would it be?
Mm, that's a really good question. I think it would be to love yourself, like to really just take the time that it takes to go look in the mirror today. And if you see a stranger, start figuring out who you are. Start taking the time, because if you really think about it, you are the only person that you're going to be with for your entire life.
Mm,
And you, the best chance that you have for happiness is to becoming your own best friend today. Because if you have another 40 years left, you get to make the best of it from today on.
that's profound. That's profound. Celeste, thank you so much for talking with me today. I know our listeners are going to be walking away with so much insight and inspiration. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Marlon.
Our guest today was Celeste Case-Ruchala. You can get in contact with her through her website at www.myhealingisyourhealing.com. She's also active on socials at Instagram, at instagram.com/myhealingisyourhealing, and tiktok.com at myhealingisyourhealing. Thanks for listening. Talk soon. If you're an event organizer, HR leader, or educator looking to bring a powerful voice to your stage, someone who speaks truth, ignites momentum, and empowers your audience to rise above what's held them back, then I want to talk to you. My keynote, Rising from the Shadows, is more than a talk. It's a transformative experience that shows people how to stop shrinking, start healing, and stand fully in their story. I've lived it. I teach it, I walk people through it. So if you're building a lineup of speakers who don't just talk but move people, head over to marlonwesh.com to create something unforgettable for your audience.